My wife's wealthy mother offered her $1 million to leave me. She paused for a moment, looked at me, then said, "I'll take it." I didn't beg or break down. I quietly handed her father documents proving she wasn't his biological child. Within days, both parents lost more than just their marriage. Original post. I, 34 male, had been with Nicole, 32, for almost 9 years. We got married 5 years ago in a small ceremony that her mother complained about for months afterward. Looking back now, maybe that should have been my first real warning sign. Nicole came from money. Not just comfortable money, but the kind where her parents owned 3 houses and her mom drove a different luxury car, depending on her mood. Her father, Richard, was a successful commercial real estate developer who'd built his fortune from scratch. Her mother, Diane, came from old money and never let anyone forget it. Me? I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with my mom and 2 sisters. My dad left when I was 7. I put myself through community college working nights at a warehouse, then finished my degree while working full-time at an insurance company. Nothing glamorous, but I worked my way up to senior claims adjuster. I made decent money, enough that Nicole and I could afford a nice townhouse and take a vacation once a year. But to Diane, I was never good enough. Never would be. She made little comments constantly. About my car being practical when she meant cheap. About our furniture being quaint when she meant poor. About my job being stable when she meant boring and low class. Nicole would laugh them off or change the subject, but she never really defended me. Not in a way that mattered. The thing is, I genuinely loved Nicole. She wasn't like her mother, or at least I thought she wasn't. She worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, even though she didn't need to work at all. She was funny and creative, and when we were alone together, away from her family, things felt real. She'd curl up next to me on the couch and talk about starting our own little design business someday, maybe having kids in a few years. But whenever we were around her parents, something changed in her. She got quieter around me, more distant. She'd sit closer to her mother than to me at dinners. She'd agree when Diane made her little digs instead of shutting them down. 3 months ago, everything fell apart on a random Tuesday evening. We'd gone to her parents' house for dinner, something we did twice a month, like clockwork. Richard was grilling steaks on their massive back patio, while Diane held court at the outdoor table with a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my car payment. Dinner was tense from the start. Diane was in one of her moods, the kind where she'd smile while sliding a knife between your ribs. She asked about my job, then made a comment about how some people are content with mediocrity. She mentioned their recent trip to the French Riviera, then asked if Nicole and I were still planning that little camping trip, with such condescension that it made my teeth hurt. Nicole just nodded along, barely looking at me. After dinner, Richard excused himself to take a business call. That's when Diane struck. She stood up, smoothed her designer dress, and looked at Nicole with this calculated expression I'd seen her use during charity board meetings. Cold. Strategic. "Nicole, darling, your father and I have been discussing your future," she said, her voice sugar-sweet poison. "We're concerned about your situation." "What situation?" Nicole asked, but her voice was small. She already knew something was coming. Diane glanced at me like I was a stain on her patio furniture. "Your marriage. We've watched you struggle financially, settle for less than you deserve. It's time to correct this mistake." My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. Years of dealing with angry clients had taught me how to stay calm when people tried to get a rise out of me. "We're not struggling," I said evenly. "We're doing fine." Diane ignored me completely, her eyes locked on Nicole. "I'm prepared to offer you $1 million to file for divorce. Clean break, fresh start. You could finally live the life you were meant to have." The world seemed to stop spinning. I looked at Nicole, waiting for her to laugh, to tell her mother she was insane, to defend our marriage and tell Diane to go to hell. But Nicole didn't do any of that. She sat there, frozen, her eyes darting between her mother and me. The silence stretched out for what felt like hours, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Calculation. Weighing options. Deciding if I was worth more than $1 million. "I'll take it," she said quietly. Just like that. 3 words. 5 years of marriage, 9 years together, gone in 3 words. I didn't yell, didn't beg, didn't break down like I'm sure Diane expected me to. Instead, I felt this weird calm wash over me, the kind of calm that comes right before a storm. Okay, I said, standing up. I'll get my things. Diane looked almost disappointed that I wasn't making a scene. Nicole wouldn't meet my eyes at all. I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning. Part of me kept thinking it was a nightmare, that I'd wake up and Nicole would be next to me like always. But the rational part of my brain, the part that had survived a difficult childhood and worked its way up from nothing, that part was already moving past the shock and into planning mode. I didn't break down that night. I didn't cry. Instead, I started thinking about something that had been nagging at the back of my mind for years. See, I'd always noticed that Nicole looked nothing like Richard. Nothing at all. Richard was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and sharp features. Nicole was petite, blonde, with soft features that matched Diane's family photos perfectly. Diane always said Nicole took after her side, and everyone just accepted it. But there was more to it than that. 2 years ago, I'd been helping Richard clear out his home office for renovations. He was telling me about his childhood, how he'd had mumps as a teenager, how it had been a really severe case. He mentioned offhandedly that the doctors had told him it might affect his ability to have kids someday, but he'd proven them wrong when Nicole was born. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but it stuck in my mind because my cousin had mumps badly as a kid, and the doctors told my aunt it had left him completely sterile. Not might affect his fertility. Sterile. Period. After that night at the patio, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I called an old college friend, Marcus, who worked as a private investigator. I told him what I needed, and he didn't ask questions, just said he'd look into it discreetly. It took him 2 weeks. The report he gave me was thorough and damning. Diane had been part of an exclusive country club in the late 1980s and early 1990s. One of the members was a man named Gregory Shaw, a hotshot attorney from a wealthy Connecticut family. Multiple witnesses remembered seeing Diane and Gregory together frequently during the time period when Nicole would have been conceived. Gregory had moved to California in 1993, shortly after Nicole was born. But the real kicker was the medical records Marcus had obtained through some connections I didn't ask about. Richard's mumps case at age 16 had indeed left him sterile. Completely, irreversibly sterile. The doctors had documented it clearly in his medical file. There was no possible way Richard was Nicole's biological father. Marcus also found that Gregory Shaw had died 3 years ago, which meant there was no risk of him showing up to complicate things. And he'd had 2 other children who bore a striking resemblance to Nicole in their photos. I stared at the documents for a long time, feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. Nicole had chosen money over me, over us, over everything we'd built together. Okay then, if money was what mattered most to her family, let's see how they handled losing all of it. The divorce proceedings started the next week. Nicole moved back in with her parents immediately, probably already spending that million in her head. She didn't fight me on anything, didn't even seem sad, just eager to get it over with. I played the part of the heartbroken husband, agreeing to everything quickly, not making waves. Her lawyer probably thought I was pathetic. That was fine. Let them think whatever they wanted. The divorce would be final in 60 days based on our state's laws. I waited 55 days. Then I arranged a meeting with Richard. Told him I wanted to return some of Nicole's family photos and heirlooms that she'd left behind, that I wanted closure before the divorce was finalized. He agreed, probably feeling sorry for me or maybe just wanting to gloat. We met at a coffee shop near his office. He showed up in a $1,000 suit, radiating that particular smugness wealthy people get when they think they've won something. I brought a folder. Richard, before we finalize everything, there's something you need to see, I said, sliding the folder across the table. He opened it, probably expecting financial documents or something I was trying to negotiate. Instead, he found his own medical records from 1982. A genetic testing report I'd paid for privately using hair samples I'd collected from Nicole's old hairbrush and a water bottle Richard had used at a barbecue 2 years ago. Marcus's investigator report detailing Diane's affair. Photos of Diane and Gregory together at the country club, his arm around her waist, her looking at him the way she'd never looked at Richard. I watched his face go from confused to pale, to red to something I can't even describe. Nicole isn't your daughter, I said quietly. Diane had an affair 32 years ago with a man named Gregory Shaw. The genetic test confirms you're not related to Nicole. Your medical records confirm you've been sterile since you were 16. I'm sorry, but you deserve to know the truth. He didn't say anything. just stared at the papers, his hands shaking. I'm not doing this to hurt you, I continued. You've always been decent to me, even if Diane hasn't. But your wife bought my marriage for $1 million, and your daughter took the deal without a second thought. So I figured turnabout was fair play. You can do whatever you want with this information. But now you know what your family really is. I left him sitting there, walked out of that coffee shop, and drove home feeling lighter than I had in months. The explosion happened within 48 hours. Richard confronted Diane with the evidence. According to the few details that leaked out through mutual acquaintances, Diane initially denied everything, then tried to downplay it, then finally admitted to the affair when faced with genetic proof she couldn't argue against. Richard filed for divorce immediately. No reconciliation, no counseling, just done. But it got worse for them. Much worse. See, Richard had built his fortune, but Diane's family money was also heavily invested in his business ventures. They'd combined finances decades ago, and Diane's family trust had bankrolled several of his biggest developments. The divorce meant untangling all of that, and Richard wanted out of every shared investment, every joint account, everything. Diane's family was old money, but not smart money. They'd made bad investments for years, and Richard's business acumen was the only thing keeping them afloat. When he pulled out, their whole financial house of cards started collapsing. But the real damage was social. In their circle, reputation is everything. And the story spread like wildfire. Diane had cheated, lied about paternity for 30 years, and destroyed her marriage when the truth came out. Richard was seen as the sympathetic victim. Diane became toxic overnight. Country club memberships were quietly revoked. Charity board positions disappeared. Friends stopped returning calls. Nicole got caught in the blast radius. Suddenly, she wasn't Richard's daughter. She was the product of an affair, the living proof of her mother's betrayal. Richard wanted nothing to do with her. He'd already removed her from his will and cut off her credit cards and access to the family accounts within days of learning the truth. The man she'd called Dad her entire life wanted nothing to do with her because she'd chosen her mother's money over the man who'd actually loved her enough to marry her. And that $1 million Diane had promised? Turned out it was supposed to come from a joint account with Richard, an account that was now frozen during divorce proceedings. Nicole got nothing. She tried calling me 2 weeks after I met with Richard. I didn't answer. She left voicemails crying, saying she'd made a mistake, that she loved me, that she wanted to fix things. Too late. Our divorce had been finalized 3 days earlier. She tried showing up at my place, but I'd already moved to a different apartment across town. Started fresh. Through mutual friends, I heard she'd lost her job. The marketing firm she worked for was owned by one of Richard's business associates, and once the story got out, they let her go during restructuring. She moved in with Diane, who downsized from their mansion to a modest condo after the divorce settlement. Last I heard, Diane was working part-time at a boutique to make ends meet. All that old family money was gone, eaten up by bad investments and legal fees. Richard had made sure she got exactly what she deserved in the divorce, and not a penny more. Nicole was struggling to find work, her reputation in the industry damaged by association with her mother's scandal. She'd gone from a life of luxury and $1 million payout to living in a small condo with her disgraced mother, both of them basically broke. As for me, I got promoted at work 6 months after the divorce. Turns out, not having the stress of a failing marriage and toxic in-laws was good for my productivity. I started dating again, nothing serious yet, but I'm in no rush. I bought a nice used motorcycle I'd always wanted, but Nicole thought was too dangerous. I took that camping trip I'd been planning, solo, and it was peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. My sisters tell me I seem happier now, lighter somehow. And they're right. I am. I don't feel guilty about what I did. Maybe that makes me a bad person, but I don't think so. I didn't create Diane's lie. I didn't make Nicole choose money over love. I didn't destroy their family with my actions. They destroyed it themselves decades ago with lies and affairs and greed. I just turned on the lights so Richard could see what he'd been living with. Some people say I went too far, that I should have just walked away and let karma handle it. But karma doesn't always show up. Sometimes you have to give it a little push. Nicole chose her price. $1 million. That's what our marriage was worth to her. Turns out, the truth was worth a lot more than that. Enough to cost her everything she thought she had. Her father. Her inheritance. Her lifestyle. Her future. Was it revenge? Yeah, I guess it was. But it was also justice. And honestly, I sleep just fine at night. The money, the mansion, the luxury cars, none of it was real. It was all built on lies and betrayal and people using each other. When I pulled that one thread, the whole thing unraveled because there was nothing genuine holding it together. My marriage to Nicole wasn't perfect, but I'd loved her honestly. I'd worked hard to build a life with her, and she threw it away for a check that never even cleared. So yeah, I handed Richard the truth about his daughter, his wife, and his entire life. And I walked away clean while their world burned down around them. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's letting people destroy themselves with their own greed and lies, then making sure everyone can see exactly what they really are. I'm good with that. Update, 3 months later. A lot of people asked me to update, so here it is. Richard reached out to me last month. We met for coffee, same place as before. He looked older, but somehow more at peace. He thanked me for telling him the truth. Said the first few weeks were hell, but now he felt free for the first time in decades. He'd sold most of his business interests and was semi-retiring to travel and figure out who he was outside of the life Diane had built around him. He told me he didn't hate Nicole, but he couldn't have a relationship with her. Every time he looked at her, he saw 30 years of lies. Maybe someday, but not now. As for Diane and Nicole, last I heard, they'd moved to a different state to escape the social fallout. Diane's family had completely cut her off, wanting nothing to do with the scandal. Nicole sent me one final email a few weeks ago. No apologies, no begging. Just a simple message. I understand now what I gave up. I'm sorry. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. I am happy. Genuinely, surprisingly happy. And that's the real ending to this story. Not their downfall, but my peace.